All right, cool. So have any of you guys had experience with Python or any programming languages before? Yeah,
I have.
All right. Yeah, so
Java
today,
and C++.
wait, what did you say now?
Java and C++.
All right. So today we're just going to start with like the very basics of Python. Obviously, like if you've learned another programming language, it'll be a little bit like easier to start with today. But yeah, we'll just go over like some of the basics of like just coding in general. So I think, okay. Can you guys all see my screen?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So basically, Replit looks something like this, and then you can like make folders here. And then to make a new REPL, which is just like a project, you just click on that, and then you click the language that you're using, so Python, and you can give it some name. So I'm just gonna call it like Workshop 1. It doesn't really matter what the name is. And then you just hit create. So it'll load up. Basically, the reason that we're using this and not something else like PyCharm is just because it takes like a while to install it. So, and Replit is like good enough for what we're doing in this workshop. So, yeah. Basically, like all the code is going to go in here, and then when we run stuff, it's going to show up over here. So like anything we print out or errors that we have in our code will show up on the console. So before we get started on coding, I just really quickly want to show you guys like how to comment. So commenting your code can be really helpful because like if someone else is reading it or you're returning to it after like a super long time, then it just helps them like kind of understand what you're trying to do. And you don't have to do it on each line. It's just like for like it can just be generic comments as much as you like. So in Python, it's just like hash symbol, and then you just like write a comment like that. So that's how you do a comment, and then that won't show, like that doesn't show up in your code. So like you can also use it to comment out code if you decide that you no longer want like a certain line. So if you see me doing that, that's just like me trying to organize my code. And you can use that to like add more comments to your code and take notes. So first we'll start off with variables. So variables in Python are pretty simple. All you have to do is like say what you want to call your variable, like x, and then just set it to like whatever you want it to be. So like let's say I want a variable called x that is equal to 5. I just have to say x equals 5. So there's different types of variables that you can do with different data types. So some of the main data, so before I do like more variables, I'll just type out some of the data types. So we have integers, which are called ints. And then we have like decimal numbers, and in Python, those are called floats. We have strings, which are like words or letters. And we have Booleans, which is like true or false. So have you guys heard of any of those? Or I know like Noah, you said you learned Java, which some of these are pretty familiar, but
what's the default? What's the default? So if you set x equal to 5, what's the default data type of x?
Yeah, so x in this case would be an integer, so an int. And if you did like 5.0, that would be a float.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll give you examples of each of these data types. So like integers, just like numbers, so positive, negative, or 0, but whole numbers. An example of a float would be just any decimal number. So it could be like I don't know, 3.3, or it could even be like 3.0. That's still a float, as long as it has a decimal in it. Those are the main two number type ones. And then we have strings, which can be like, it can be like a single letter, or it can be a word or a sentence. And the way that we type strings is we put them between quotes. So that's like pretty important to remember. Also, if you guys want me to slow down, just let me know. Or if you have questions, you can just unmute and say something. Yeah, so those are strings. And then, so Booleans are like, there's only two values for them. And there's a few different ways we can set them. But for now, we'll just say like they're true or false. So you always set it to like, I was going to call it. So like if you just say like true, but make sure that's a capital T, and then same thing for false. If you want it to be false, you'd set it to a capital F. So this is just kind of how you declare variables. If you're doing something like more specific, like you can make a variable called name, and then you like it's more descriptive that way. So usually variable names, you just make it like what the actual variable represents. But obviously, like in these cases, it's just like random things, so it doesn't really matter. But if it does represent something, you should name it that. All right, so far, any questions about variables or data types? All right. And there's also other data types that we'll go more over maybe towards the end of today or next time. So those are things like lists or like sets, things like that. So these are just like the really basic ones that you need to know. All right, so the other thing we can do is like, so now if I like run my code, it doesn't really do anything. So nothing shows up here. It just runs and stops immediately. So we can also print stuff to our console. And that's also like pretty simple. So all you do is just type print, and then in the parentheses, if we're printing out a string, for example, then I could just print out like what I want in my string. So I have to write the string inside the print, including the quotations and everything. So now when I run this, it prints out hi on my console. So also like if I, for example, if I like delete the quotes, it thinks that this is a variable. So that's why we have quotes around the hello or any strings, because if you don't, then it just kind of thinks it's a variable. So that's like pretty important to remember. If you like typed a number in here, it would automatically recognize it as like an int or a float. So it knows that it's not a variable because variables don't have like number names. So it would print that out. So you can print stuff out like that.
But it's not printing anything out for me.
When you run it?
Yeah, it's just running and it's not stopping.
You can try refreshing the page. Sometimes Replit does that. And does it show you any errors or anything?
Nope, but now it's working. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, it gets stuck sometimes. That's definitely the downside of this. It's just like really easy to set up because everything else takes like 30 minutes. Okay, yeah, so you can directly type inside your print statement like what you want to print, or you can also print out variables. So like if I wanted to print out like my hello from here, then I could just type Z in here, and it recognizes it as a variable and not a string because it doesn't have quotes around it. So it's going to search like my code for where I define Z, and then it'll print that out here. And print statements are like super helpful because, I mean, first of all, it shows you like information if you wanted to print something out in your console. And you can also use it to test your code. So like if something's not working, you could do a bunch of print statements to kind of try and figure out like what's going wrong. So like printing out if there's like a value that's being calculated, you can figure out like do a print between each of the steps to figure out where it gets messed up. So along with print statements, you can kind of like combine things inside print statements. So like let's say, so like I have this variable called name, right? And if you guys don't already have one, go ahead and make one called name just for this example. And then so we can basically combine like our own string with the variable inside a print statement. So it's called like string concatenation, which is just like adding strings together. So if I just say like, hello, my name is, and then do plus name. So like this part of my string is going to get added to like this, and it's going to print that out. And then also as a quick note, it doesn't automatically put a space there after is, so you just want to make sure that if you're doing like a print statement like this, where you're concatenating strings, just make sure that you have like the formatting spaces and everything correctly. So when I run this, it'll print out, hello, my name is Nikita. So all of you guys go ahead and try that. I just want to also make sure again if anyone's having issues with it. Or if like anything's giving you errors. Also, am I going like at a decent pace or am I going too fast?
I think you're good.
Okay. All right, so with string concatenation, the one major rule is that like everything in here has to be the same data type, and with concatenation, it's like everything in here has to be a string, right? Because this is a string and this is a string. So like if I try to like make a number, like so for example, if I just do like age as another variable, and also I know I'm typing all the variables up here, but you can put them like anywhere as long as it's before the point where you're using it, if that makes sense. So like as long as it comes before this print statement where I'm going to use it. So let's say I want to say like, hello, my name is whatever, and then you can add like more than two strings together. So it's like, hello, my name is Nikita, and then I'm like adding that space here again. And I am like age old. And the formatting is kind of annoying with the spaces, but it's just like something to remember. It's not really a big deal. It just like it looks nicer. That's it. But basically when I run this, it's going to give me an error. Yeah, so it says like can only concatenate strings, like str stands for string, not int to another string. So it's like getting mad at me for this, but like let's say you have a variable that you can't make this, like one way of fixing this would just to put quotes around this. And now this would, the data type for this would be a string. But now if I wanted to like change this variable, like if I wanted to add to it or subtract or whatever, I wouldn't be able to do that because it's not a number anymore technically. So something that we can do is change the data type like temporarily. So that's called casting. And basically when you cast something, it's like you're casting a string to, if you cast a string to an int, which is what age is right now, it's an int. Like if I cast the string, it'll turn it into a string just like right here. So the way that I do that is just type like the abbreviation for string, which is just str. And then I put parentheses around like my variable name. So now when I run it, it'll print it out normally without any errors. So let me know if anyone's having issues with that. All right. So, so this is like string concatenation. You can also do like adding numbers or doing math operations inside print statements. So like we have our x and y, right? These two variables. I could do print x plus y. And that would just get those two variables and print them out, like add them together and print them out. So you can do that all inside like your print statement. Or another option is to just make like another variable that's equal to that and then print that out. Oh, sorry. And it does the same thing. So it's up to you how you want to use them. Print statements are just helpful to see like what your variables are, especially when you're changing them. And then kind of going off of that, so one really useful thing that we can do in Python is math operations. There's actually like a Python package that you may have heard of called NumPy, which is really useful for like bigger computations, and it almost acts like MATLAB in Python. So if you, for some reason, prefer to use Python over MATLAB, then you could basically replace it with that. But for now, we'll just focus on like really basic math operations. So like if you, oh yeah, so you know how I mentioned comments earlier? So this is a single line comment with a hash symbol, but you could also do multi-line comments if you want to like, I don't know, type out multiple lines of comments or like comment out a large section of your code. So it's just like 3 quotes or apostrophes, either one works. And you just do that before and after where you want to type your comment, and then you type in between. So, oh yeah, so this is going to be math operations. So there's like the few obvious ones. We have addition, subtraction, division is just this, multiplication. And then there's a couple other ones that you sometimes, especially like with programming. So one of them is the modulus symbol, or like mod. Sometimes, like that's what you usually hear it as mod. Have you guys heard of that before?
No.
All right, yeah, so I'll come back to that in a second. And then also, if you wanted to do exponents, it would be, normally you would think that it's that, but it's actually like 2 asterisks, which is a little bit weird. I always forget that one, so that's just like something to remember, I guess. But for the modulus, basically what that is it gives you the remainder. So if you do like 5 mod 3, so that would basically look like, I'll just print it out so it's easier. So 5 mod 3, that's basically doing 5 divided by 3, and then you just find the remainder of that. So 5 divided by 3 is 1 remainder 2, so it's going to print out 2 right here. Yeah. it's usually used when you're trying to find out if something is even or odd. So like if you do a bunch of calculations and for some reason you need to check if something's even or odd, then you can check that using mod, because an even number, so like 10, so any even number mod 2 is always going to equal 0. And then any odd number mod 2 is going to equal 1. So that's like a pretty useful thing in a lot of programming that's used. Does that make sense? Or do you guys have any questions about math operations? All right. Yeah, and the other ones, I'm going to assume that you guys know like those, obviously. So yeah, you can just do them normally, like how we did like x plus y, or you can just add numbers together.
How do you do square roots? Can you
square roots? Yeah, okay. So there's also, so these are like the ones that come like with Python, but there's this Python module called math, and it basically has like other, I guess, more advanced math stuff like operations. So it has stuff like pi, like the exact value of pi, and square roots. So the way that we do that is we have to import the module. So you just you usually do this at the very top. You again technically only have to do it before you use it, but if you just type import math, that's the name of our module. And it comes with all these different functions that are like math values or operations. So once you have the import math, you can just do like print math.pi. So that's just going to be the value of pi. I don't know how much it'll. I think it got stuck. Hold on. And then, yeah, so since you're taking stuff out of the module, you do like math dot whatever. So that's why I did. It's supposed to save automatically, but sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, there we go.
So, square root function built in.
Yeah, so that one is also a math dot one. So if I do math dot square root, and that's a function, so math dot pi is just a value, square root is a function. So if I just put like 4 in there, that does it. Yeah. I don't know all of the math stuff, like the different values and functions that come with math off the top of my head. But like if you're looking for something specific, like there's a lot of resources for Python. So if you just search up like what you're trying to do in Python, it'll pop up. So yeah. But yeah, these are probably the main two that you'll use with math. Are there like any other questions about that and the math operations? All right, cool. And then something I want to touch on really quickly that's used in code a lot, but might like look a little bit confusing. So let's say I have a variable. I'll just define another one, f equals 10. So I have this number and I want to add 1 to it. So like later somewhere in my code, then I can do like f equals f plus 1. So now if I print out f, it'll be 11. But an easier way to do it is to, I think this is in, like most programming languages let you do this. So if you do f plus equals 1, that's basically doing the same thing. So you're just adding 1 on top of what's already there. So it'll be 11. And you can do that with like any number. So like 20, I don't know. Then it's adding 20 on top of what's already there. And it also works with subtraction. So you can do minus equals, and it'll subtract from what's like what the original was. So that can be really useful if you're counting something, which we'll do more when we do loops. So like if you're counting how many times it looped or something like that. Does that make sense, or do you have any questions before we move on to the next thing? Or if you need me to go back to anything. All right, cool. Okay, so the next, so those are just like variables, print statements, math operations. So that's like kind of the very basics, but there's like you can also do more like logical stuff. So that's gonna have to do with Booleans, which is the true or false data type. So we're gonna do something called if-else statements, and it basically just lets you check, I guess, like if something is true or false, and then based on that, you do like whatever. It'll make more sense when we get to it. I'm not explaining this very well. So basically, like let's say we just have two variables that are, just as like a really simple example, we have two variables that are different numbers. So we'll call, or okay, let's see. Yeah, we have x and y here already, so we'll just use those. But if you don't have two variables, just make two that are like numbers. So the way that we do if-else statements, we can, I'm just gonna make something that checks if x or y is greater. So I'm just gonna do if x is greater than y, print, and I'm just gonna put print statements inside here. So x is larger, and then else print y is larger. And I know we didn't check if it's equal yet, but we'll get to that later. So here, like you'll see that I have something in my if, but nothing after my else. So right now I'm just assuming that like if x isn't larger, that means that y is larger, which obviously isn't true because they can be equal. But for now, let's just assume that. So our else case is basically like the very last case. So like if we can add as many ifs and like conditions basically before our else as we want. And if none of them are true, then it's going to do whatever's inside the else. And another important thing is like you see that it indented. So everything that we're doing like inside this first if, so like if this is true, whatever we're doing is going to be indented 1 over from that. And then the else will be like back to the normal indentation, and the print for the else will be like indented 1 over because it's in like this is only happening within the else. Does that make sense? Kind of. If you done like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So at the end of the line for every if and else, do we need the colon?
Yeah, so the colon is basically like it just lets you know that you're going to put stuff inside this statement. So that's why like when you do the colon, it'll automatically indent it for you because it knows that you're going to put stuff inside. Yeah. So if you've done like I kind of forget what other languages, but I know Java has like what's it called? Curly brackets. So that kind of acts like the indentation almost. So the indentation, like it's like whatever's inside the curly brackets is inside this if statement. So instead it's just like whatever's indented one level over is inside this if statement.
MATLAB, C++, and Java all have the curly brackets.
I don't know if MATLAB has it, does it?
Yeah. For
I don't think I've ever used it in MATLAB.
yeah, MATLAB has the
Oh.
pretty sure. Oh no, it doesn't.
Yeah, it has like it just has the end thing.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's different in every language. In Python, it's like the colon and indentation.
Is there like an end statement for an if, like something that says the if is done?
Yeah, so it's kind of dumb, but the thing that tells you if the if is done is if it's like if it goes back to the same level. So like this else showing up at the same level is that like the if kind of ends it off.
Oh.
So yeah, it's like when your indentation returns back to the same level, that's when it tells you that whatever's inside the if is done. So also you can redefine variables. So like I know I have them up here, but I'm just gonna redefine my variables like as random other things down here so I can change them later. And it'll just like overwrite what you had previously, because when Python, like when Replit runs your code, it's just running it in order. So now when I run this, it'll print out, yeah, X is larger. So did everyone get something like that, or are you running into issues or have questions with this so far? All right, cool. So like I said before, in this case, like there's three options actually, like either X is the larger number or Y is the larger number, or they're equal. But here we only have like an if and an else. So we actually have, I don't know why the clicking isn't working. Okay, we can actually do what's called an elif, which is like another condition. So again, I'm just going back to the same level of indentation as this, and I'm gonna do an elif to check. And it's an elif is basically, it's the same as an if, but it is like within the same like statement, so it doesn't run separately. And you can have as many like elif statements, which are just like more conditions, as you want. So in this case, since we only need three, we just need one elif. So I'll just make this check if they're equal. And to check if they're equal, so it's like x equals y, like if x equals y. But since we're checking it, we use two equal signs. That's just kind of like the syntax for this. So it's when you're setting a number, like setting a variable, that's when you use the single equal sign. And then when you're checking a variable, so checking if x equals y, then you use two. And then in here, I'll just print x and y are equal. So now like the first condition is if x is larger, the second one is if they're equal, and then that means that the only thing left if it reaches the else is if y is larger. So it's gonna, when your code runs, it checks them in order. So like it'll first check if x is greater than y, and if it is, then I'll just print this out and it'll skip the rest. It won't even check these ones at all. And then if it's not, then it'll go to the next one, and then it'll go to the else last. So, oh, I didn't change the numbers. Yeah. Yeah, so now it prints out x and y are equal. So like the order thing is just something to keep in mind, because like there's certain things that might like be true in two cases, if that makes sense. So it might not actually print out the thing that you want or do the thing that you want. So checking that order is really important. So any questions with that? All right, and I noticed I didn't show you guys this, but like, so greater and less than are just like normal, like that. And then if you're doing like greater than or equal to, that would be greater than or equal to. Less than or equal to would be like that. And then we have like just checking if it's equal is like 2 equal signs. Yeah. There's also not equal, which I always forget this one because
Exclamation point?
yeah, it
Equal sign?
is that, except in Python. So Python uses words sometimes. So you can also, instead of like equals and not equals, you could also type out equals or not equals like that. So I forget if it only works with strings though. So like if I type out equals, yeah, it only works in certain cases. Not equals. I always forget, but yeah, you could also do not equals. So the exclamation mark means not. Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I know that you can use words in certain places though, but I usually use the operators. Yeah, and then if you notice, everything, all these conditions, these if statements are all Boolean. So like, for example, if I were to like completely separate from our if else, if I were to do a print to check if x is equal to y, so this is going to print out a Boolean. So it's going to print out true, like that. So that's another way you can define Booleans. So like if I defined a Boolean that's just equal to check like if x is equal to y, and then I printed out z here, that's like just printing out true. So you can set variables like Booleans that way too. If you don't know if it's like true or false, you can check it first.
How do you do Boolean operations? So it and, or, XOR, NAND, and
Yeah.
etc.
So yeah, that's what we'll do next. So like trying to think of like a good example for that. Okay, so like let's just say like, oh wait, no, that doesn't work. One second. Okay, let's just do like weather or something. So like sunny equals something, and or yeah. So I'll just right now I'll set sunny to false and rainy to true. So if we do an if, so we can use like, and so I think someone unmuted. Did you have a question or anything, or?
Oh, it unmuted me for some reason. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're all good. All right. So for Python, when you type and or and stuff, because I know it's different in every language, you usually just type it out like that. So and or I haven't really used anything besides those two, honestly. But basically, and means like both of them have to be true, or means just one of them has to be true. So if I do like if sunny and if sunny and rainy, then that means that both sunny and rainy are true. I don't know. And then I can do an elif to check if it's not sunny and rainy. So to type that, it would just be like not sunny and rainy. So that means that sunny has to be false and rainy has to be true. So that just means that like it's rainy. Should have thought of a better example. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head.
Oh, I figured out where the exponent sign is. The little caret is used for XOR.
Oh.
Boolean operations.
Yeah, I've never really used that. But yeah, usually you just need and or, and then you can type not to make it like false. So yeah, and then you can like play around with the variables. Like you can add more, you can add as many as you want. Like hot equals true. And then I could do another elif that's like elif it's sunny and hot and not rainy, then it's nice outside. I don't know. And then the or would be like if you were doing like you just wanted to check if one of them was true. So like elif sunny or hot, then warm outside, something like that. This isn't really the best example, but like it's just kind of to get you to understand how like these variables work. So like if I just say if sunny or hot, then that just means like sunny or hot has to be true. And if I put the not in front of it, in front of like one of the variables, that just means that that one has to be false. Does that make sense? Or do you guys have any questions about the Booleans and if-else statements? And then something else you can do with Booleans is like you can check if something is like equal to a string. So like one like really simple example is like if you have a password and then you're checking if a password that someone entered is equal to the actual password, then you could set like if you're just gonna print it out. So, or okay, no, hold on. You could do like if like entered password is equal to password, and then I'll just define like entered over here. So if it's equal, then just print correct password, and then else, so like if it's wrong, then you print wrong, something like that. So you can also check if stuff is equal to a number, or I could do it like as a string too, either one, as long as it's like consistent. So like if I run this, it just prints out wrong. So you can do something like that. All right. And then kind of going off of this example, I think like the last thing we'll touch on for today is user input. So for this console, usually use it just to print stuff out, but you can actually also take in user input from here and let people type in like stuff in the console and then basically check it in your code. So here I have like this variable called entered, and that's like the hypothetical password that someone entered, but I could actually like do this on my console instead of just setting it here, like as if someone was actually entering it in. So the way that we do that is we do input, and do you see when I type input, it like kind of pops up with this thing that says input prompt. So input is like just a Python function, like a built-in function, and it has this like prompt that it asks for. So you don't actually need that if you don't want. If you just do input like that, then when I run my code, it's still running, so it's waiting for me to type something in. So if I just type in like something random, it's setting that, like what I just typed in, to this variable here called entered, and then it's checking it here in my if statement. But if you want to, you can add a prompt in here, so you just add it in as a string. So I can just say like, what is the password? And then when I run my code, I can just type in like 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and then it prints out correct password. And again, you'll notice there's no space here, so you can just add that in at the end right there like that. And it's like, yeah. So that's how you can use user input. So let's say this is a number now. So now it's an integer instead of a string. So when I run this, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think it'll change anything? Any guesses? Or you could also just try it. So basically, it still asks me like for the password, and if I type in the correct one, okay, yeah, so it says wrong, because basically like entered, so if you use input here, it's always gonna read it as a string. So like this data type here is an int, and then this one is always gonna be a string. So to fix that, we either have to cast a string to this one or an int to this one. Usually it's better to cast like a string to an int. So like if I just do the casting that we did like way earlier. So now entered is already a string, and then password is going from an int to a string. So it's just converting this variable into a string temporarily while it checks it. So now when I try to run this, it looks like that. So it gives, or it like actually recognizes it as being equal. So even if they look the same, but they're different data types, they won't be equal technically. All right. Yeah, so those are kind of the basics. We can start with lists a little bit today, because I'm kind of hoping like our first 3 workshops will be like just Python, like just learning Python, and then the second 3 will be tkinter, which is like a package to make like UI stuff. So I think that's what they're thinking of using for the ground station. So that'll be more useful. But so far, any questions on anything that I went over today, or anything you want me to go back to, or you want to learn about? All right, cool. All right, so I'll spend like 5-ish minutes just introducing lists, and then we'll like continue with that during our next workshop.
I had a question.
Yeah.
when or what is the Python file type and how is it run?
Like, you mean like the py thing? Like the,
Okay, so it's yeah. PY, I
yeah, so a
guess.
Python file is like whatever it's called .py, and it's really different from other languages because you don't have to really do any setup for it. Like usually you have to like define what's going to be in the file. Like in Java, it's like object oriented, so you define like the classes and objects at the beginning of the file usually. But in Python, it kind of just runs like whatever's in there. So it just runs it in order, like line by line. So it just defines like X as 5, defines Y, so on. It prints everything in order. So it just goes like that. And then if you have multiple files in the same project, like I can add files like this, and it just like that. If I just type the py at the end, it'll automatically make it a Python file. But this run always runs main. So if you wanted to make additional files, it's usually they're called modules usually. So you're making a separate module, and the main is where you run all your main code, and then the other modules have functions in them that you're like defining so that you can run it in your main code. So like, for example, if you're making a game or something like that, you can make a file that's just like all the functions for the game that like, I don't know, checks if you won or lets you like play a turn. And then in your main file, that's where you would like actually call all those functions. So we'll go over it more when we actually learn about functions, because I know that might be like really new to some people. But the files usually just let you organize your code. So if you wanted to, you could have like a 1,000-line file, and it could just all be like one thing. But yeah, it's really up to you on how you code.
Well, like C++, you save it and you compile it as an exe, and then you run the exe. So I'm saying like a Python file, how do you run it? Like I'm not going to open Replit every time I want to run
yeah. I mean, you
Python
really
file.
just run it like in an I'm not really sure. I haven't used like Python outside of like an IDE. Like I haven't made an app or anything using Python, so I don't really know too much about that one. But I'm guessing it's something similar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, also I know that we're kind of almost out of time, and that I think Terrence has his workshop next, so we'll just stop there. But next time we'll start with lists and also loops, and then we'll go over functions, because there's like a lot of websites that let you just practice Python, and it starts pretty basic too. So like you can start with just like the basics of what you've learned and then work your way up, but they usually require you to like understand how functions work. So we'll do that next time. And then yeah, so I think our next one's on Monday. Also, I try to keep the times consistent, but my schedule's a little bit weird next week, so